Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We are grateful for Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for sponsoring these programs. They are accepting residents, and they're in the process of constructing assisted and independent living to go with their memory care up on Rolling Bay. They also offer day stay and respite programs. To learn more or take a tour, call 360-689-4314. We'd also like to mention that we are gathering on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, who have lived on these waters of the Salish Sea since time immemorial. We honor them and we are grateful for their hospitality. And we are grateful for all of you attending today to talk about transgender people and our continuing lifting up of people who are facing cultural backlash right now, and trying to do what we can to give comfort and strength and power to turn the mood of our country, our darker corners of our country, around a little bit on this issue. People are people and love is love. To help us discuss this is my good friend and colleague Ann Lovejoy, who's been helping us with the series of idea, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility discussions that we have been having here for quite a while now.
Right. Thanks, Reed. So I wanted to sort of start off by saying that Transgender Day of Visibility is really kind of an annual day of recognition. It's celebrated around the world today, March 31st, and it's really dedicated to celebrating the accomplishments and victories of transgender and gender expansive or creative people, and raising awareness of the work that still needs to be done to combat discrimination and violence, which obviously we all know about that. There are some wonderful things that happen now and again, but there's also a lot of difficult stuff. But I think for us, I wanted to tell all of you, the panelists, and that these programs are recorded and then they're put on our website for later viewing. And a lot of times they do get quite a lot of later views. And if you're not okay with that, you can either just take your name off if that's something that you don't feel comfortable with, or you can not use your face, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Yeah, but you can, as I was doing, you can just turn off your video and somebody will see whatever name you have up there and you can still talk. Or if you want to make sure that you don't show up on the screen at all you have to do is keep your microphone muted.
And you can change your name too, if you want to.
You can change your name, or if you're having difficulty with that, I'm happy to change your name. Just send me a note in the chat and I can do that for you.
Right. But part of why we are gathered here is because I'm really aware that even among many of our friends at the Senior Center, we have a queer elder family group, and many of the members are here today. And quite a few of them have said, I don't know about transgender people. I don't know the story. I don't know what that even necessarily means or involves. And I know that there are many, many people on Bainbridge Island, in Kitsap, all around the country, really, who do not have that knowledge or understanding. And in fact, I myself was one of those people who had no clue at all. And I kind of wanted to start it off by talking a little bit about when my daughter came out to me now 7 years ago, at age 35, not me, her, right? She told me she wanted to have an important conversation. We met and she started to tell me that she was trans and looked really distressed. And I said, oh, so does that mean you're a gay girl now? And she's like, oh, Mom, gender and sexuality have nothing to do with each other. And I was like, they don't? I mean, I didn't know. She's like, you never had to know. You never had to know that because you passed for cisgender. I was like, cisgender. So it's like this learning curve of trying to unpack a very big story in a fairly short time and kind of learn what is going on with so many of our family and friends who are doing what we call today gender exploring, or becoming more gender creative, which is a term I really appreciate and love. And I'm hoping that some of you will weigh in with your own stories and your own explanations. But I wanted to say right off the top that because of my daughter's journey and because I started looking around and doing quite a bit of learning, I started a group called Transfriending, and we meet in person once a month and on Zoom once a month. And if you're interested in that, you can also let me know in the chat, and we will. You can be added to the notifications list if you would like to. That is a group for family and friends and allies of transgender people. That is a place where you will get resources, you will find a lot of information, you will get guidance and love and support. And that goes for you if you are a transgender person or a parent, friend, family of someone who is in transition or thinking about transition or fully transitioned, all of the above. So yeah, you can share my email on this video. Reed can put it in the chat. It's ann.lovejoy@gmail.com. Could hardly be simpler. So yeah, you're very welcome to get in touch with me about any of those things, right? And I would love to start by asking any of you here, Mike, for instance, you said you really don't know. Can you say a little more about what you'd like to know?
I just love hearing the story of how the people came to realize that they were transgender and what that means to them, and what the process is for how they decide how that's going to change the rest of their life. Is that too general?
Yeah, well, and of course, it's different for every single person. Eve, do you want to say something to that?
No, I do, but first, I really want to recognize that my wonderful friend, Amelia, is here from Port Townsend, and that I have learned long ago that it is always best to defer to Amelia, who has just been such an active person up in the Jefferson County, North Sound area, that I would really like to give her the chance to respond first.
Excellent, thank you. Amelia, would you care to join in with some comments?
Sure. Thank you, Eve. That was really heartfelt. I really, I think it's so important that, I don't know if you ever heard the song, Trying to Leave Something Behind by Shannon. And, I think that's what I always have, tried to envision in my mind, trying to leave something behind. And then also how many people I can take with me. So my story is kind of, I don't think it's unique. I think it's, shared among many, people that, have, a gender conflict. And then, one thing that's really important, there's no conflict. The conflict is the social construct that's put on people like us, because we know. I mean, I knew when I was a little boy that I wanted to, wear my sister's clothes and, dress up. I would tape Scotch tape on my fingernails and then paint it so that I wouldn't get caught and take them off real quick. But I'm in the architectural engineering construction arena. And it's not that cool to say, well, I want to go get my hair done. But I was planning on taking it to the grave. And until I had my liver transplant, and my whole life just totally changed around. And I had gone into town for my first makeup session, and I came home, and I had forgotten that I invited the gutter people to come and replace our gutters. And I got out of the car, and then the contractor's walking up to me, and I almost lost it. I said, I'm freaking out. And he's got this clipboard and he's explaining everything to me, and I'm just saying, can't you see? And because I was, pretty lubed up there. And so, and then, I realized that, I was out of the closet. And then I turned and this is all, metaphorically speaking, but I turned and the door slammed shut. And I started banging on it and I said, let me in, let me in. And then I realized that I'm not ashamed anymore and I'm not embarrassed. And so that was my first, actually realizing that I wasn't a social deviant and I wasn't, weird or anything like that. And, thanks to so many people around me, like Eve, supported me, and all the people here in Port Townsend accepted me. When I came out in 2015, meeting Amelia, you Google that meeting, it's a big, gigantic spread in the Port Townsend leader. And I started then, my activism, when I think it's like a good friend of mine, Michelle Sandoval, said that when your space or your deal is being interrupted, then you automatically you become an activist. I'm not an activist, but I do I do a lot of activism and human rights stuff. But that's the long and short of it. But anybody have any questions or something?
I think, go ahead, Fern.
Well, no, I'm just so appreciative of those of you who are willing to share your stories. And I've only had the opportunity to speak with one or two of you, but I've been so impressed by the passion with which there was no doubt in your mind. And I think one of the things that I hear in the community is, well, but what if they want to change their mind, and I think that's a question that people are often grappling with. But I have been impressed by those of you who have shared your stories, that this doesn't seem, we just need to accept what people say. They know. So why is it so difficult for us to just accept what people say and know? My biggest concern right now is, all the legal things that are go across the country. What can we do? We should be able to do something to help stop some of those things. I don't know. I'm not aware of everything that's going on, except I hear Nebraska and I hear things. I don't know of anything in Washington State, but I would like us to be proactive if there's something we can do with some of the legal stuff that's going on.
Can
Well,
I jump in real quick? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, jump.
Educate. I think that's the primary thing that once we stand up, that's our responsibility, to educate as many people that we can. And the more people, the more hearts we touch, I think the more acceptance that we'll get. It's like, everybody knew me as Henry. I was a male asshole. But, I when I finally came out, they said, wow. It's like, and I'm happy now, but you were really angry. And I realized that I was really angry. But now I'm happy. I don't have to hide anything from anybody anymore. It's like, I'm here. I'm here. That's it,
And yes, George.
At least one thing I'd like to add is that to what I think it was Fern or Anne who said, just accept. And I still remember the time when I came out as gay to one of my dearest friends, and he said, are you sure? And it's like, I have been carrying this at that point for 35 something, at least 30 years. Yes, I am freaking sure. Why do you doubt me if you care about me? And I don't need to understand. I feel I don't need to understand the transgender journey. I need to accept the person who knows who they are.
Before I talk, because I'll go on too long. Lynn, do you want to say something? So good to see you. You and Amelia should really meet sometime.
Eve, you know that I'm also one that can go on and on and on for much too long. I mean, my story is probably similar to a lot of people. I knew from an incredibly young age that I wasn't like the boys that I got grouped with. And it's not that I wanted to wear my sister's clothes or, do those kinds of things, but it's just that was the group that I felt an affinity with. I remember one specific family reunion. This was back in the 1960s. So, I was probably 5 years old, something like that. And all of the cousins, my dad comes from a very big family. So there are lots of cousins, and all the cousins were sort of grouping up, and all of the girls went into the kitchen, and I tried to follow them into the kitchen, and they shooed me out and told me to go play with the boys. And I thought, wait, why would I want to go play with the boys? That doesn't make any sense. But I just left the kitchen and sat down and read a book or something. That's what that was. And yeah, it hasn't changed. It didn't change. I didn't transition publicly, at least until 53, almost 54 years old. I'm about to turn 61 right now. So, yeah, it definitely was not the kind of thing that, not just a phase. I didn't grow out of it. Yeah. Also, I had found out after I transitioned that some friends of mine revealed to me that their nickname for me before was Eeyore. I mean, I knew I was angry. I thought I was holding it in pretty well, but apparently not.
Well, I've never thought of Eeyore as being angry, so that's the one thing.
I was pretty grumpy. I was pretty grumpy all the time.
Yeah, grumpy is different from being angry. Thank you so much. But you have to tell people because what you said to your sister when you asked her if she ever thought.
So, yeah, when I came out to my family, the first person I came out to was my son, who was a college student studying psychology and criminal justice. So for him, it was just like, yeah, and. And the second person was my sister. My sister is quite the tomboy. She loves doing. I got her a set of cordless power tools for her birthday one year. She said it was the best gift she'd ever received. She was always doing the kind of stuff that you expect boys to do. And I said to her, did you ever think deep down inside you're actually a guy? And she says, no. And I said, me neither. And she pauses and she says, wait, what, you're trans? I said, yeah. And she says, well, that explains a lot. So.
Yeah, thank you. You are wonderful. I think that first off, it's really interesting that Lynn and Amelia and myself all came out really, about the same time, within a year or two of each other. So it may have been something in, some astronomical or astrological thing that happened. I have no idea. Maybe that we just couldn't bear it anymore. Maybe it just seemed like it was right because now there was beginning to be a language for what we are. And when I was a little kid in the 50s, late 50s, there was no language.
Mm-hmm.
There was no language. There was no idea about this whatsoever. I do remember that, a really popular song back then was she wore an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini that she wore for the first time that day. And I thought that, oh yeah, I'd love that. But I knew that I couldn't do that because I was already referred to, and when my father introduced his family, I was, very simply number 3 son. And okay, that's what I've got to be. I remember when I was very young, in grade school, I started grade school, I think, and I was with my favorite cousin Helene, and she was a little bit of a tomboy or whatever, and she asked me, we were out in the yard, and she asked me, if you had your choice, would you be a boy or a girl? And I froze because I thought that I had somehow given away my secret. Just absolutely froze. And I didn't want to lie to her, but I didn't want to tell her the truth. And I stumbled around and tried to think, why would I want to be a boy? Why would I want to be a boy? And I just said, I want to be a boy because I get to play baseball. Because at that time, girls didn't really get to play baseball. And it felt I got out of that. It was something that was always there and always denied. And the more I tried to find out about it, the more all the rules of what a transsexual person would be said, no, you're not that, you're not that. And the lack of language and the determination by a lot of people that there was, I won't say it was an article of faith in the gay community, but I think it was in Vogue or Paris is Burning, I think, in the 80s. And they were interviewing this guy who, he refused to call himself trans. He was just a gay guy who does a lot of drag and has a very femme appearance. And he said, these transsexual people, they just won't admit that, they're just taking the easy way out because they, won't admit that they're gay. I would have been okay with being gay, I could understand. What I couldn't understand. And I really had to get over it and just bury it. And I found all sorts of reasons to bury it in all sorts of ways. And, Amelia, I know, was in the military. Lynn's the child of the military. People know how to bury it. And it just comes out that at some point, I got married, I had 2 daughters, and I thought I could just put this behind me all the time. What counseling I did initially, they said, don't tell anybody. And everything was framed with, you're a cross-dresser. Even in the trans community at that time, there was a harsh line between cross-dressers and actual transsexuals. Even Ingersoll Center, had one night for real transsexuals and the next night for cross-dressers. We weren't even accepted really in the trans community. And most of the people who were cross-dressing were in fact transgender, but clothes only, didn't really have it. It was just the only way you could express it all. It was just like, it just took forever for there to be a language for it, for there to be time for it, for your kids to grow up, for you to grow up. And when you finally allow yourself to be yourself, you say, oh, this is right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there was, my question was always, I had the same thing, Amelia and Lynn did. No one's ever going to know this. No one will ever know this. And there was a time where I came close to doing myself in, where I basically said to myself, it should go on my tombstone. No one ever knew.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thing I had really accomplished. No one ever knew. And then just life turned out that, yeah, I needed to know. I took a long time doing it, years of therapy, and, you know, a lot of impatience from my therapist. But yeah, it's really rare that of people I know who really decide they're going to transition, that they suddenly say, oh, wait, that's a mistake.
Mhm.
You know, people know themselves well enough generally in this area, and that there's now enough room so you can be gender creative, as Anne was saying, and I would really do like that. But there's just almost no way that you want to go back.
Mhm.
You know, because you're there, and you know, it's like, oh, for the first time in your life, you're there with yourself. I always have trouble with the idea that it's society's issue and not mine.
Yeah.
And I'll accept been my issue. I never gave my parents a chance to react. You know, they could very well have been accepting. I never gave them the chance.
Mhm.
I waited until they were both, you know, had both passed on. I didn't know my dad was going to live to nearly 95. You know, what was in his mind? Didn't he know that I was waiting?
Let's hear from Rita here. She got her hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering if is it Adele had anything she might want to say or share with us?
Certainly. I think my experience is similar to a lot of people's here. I never had any real doubt about who I was. It has been a matter of working up enough resolve to actually come out and say that. I am lucky. I chose a really good time, right before public discourse really started demonizing trans people again, kind of in that time period where it was sort of gaining wider acceptance. And I got lucky on that front. To me, though, it has never been a question. You know, I think how we as a society define ideas like male and female are mostly an assortment of traits, which people will, you know, if you exhibit a certain amount of those traits, people will consider you more male or more female. And for some reason, depending on what genitals you have, it's unacceptable to have a certain set of those traits or not. And I think that's really what it amounts to. And no, I have never had doubts or questions, really.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adele. You know, over the pandemic, when everybody was on their devices so much and a lot of people weren't in school, we noticed in the transfriending group that there was a lot of kids who were coming out as trans or gender exploring or gender neutral or gender flexible or gender fluid or gender a lot of things. And that was probably the first time in human history when there'd been anything like the opportunity to experiment with those ideas without peer pressure at school and to have the resource of the internet, which was really kind of fascinating. And one of the things we heard from when we first started doing these programs in 2020, we had quite a few high school kids who were joining us because of the idea of programming, the inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility programming we were doing. And at that time, one of the things that we were hearing quite a bit from the kids was that it was an opportunity they didn't feel like they had when with peer pressure at school. That was really hard. And that later by the time it was 2022, say, some of the kids were saying, when we came out and we were going back to school, we had a whole different set of friends. Like a lot of people we'd been friends with since childhood were not going to go there, but we found other friends who really were. And I think one of the interesting parts for the parents was that they weren't sharing the journey necessarily. And there was kind of a, like in my case, a kind of a shock value of like, oh, well, what just happened here? That has been a great, what would you say, teachable moment, learning opportunity to do some more exploring. But you're right, Adele, that you probably transitioned in one of the best times there ever was. And I'm just hoping, here in Washington State, we've been pretty lucky. To answer Fern, like, what can we do about legal pushback? In Washington State, we are so fortunate that our governor is very supportive and has made sure that that's going to stay true, right? Minnesota also recently came out as a pro-trans protective. They made a big statement from Minnesota State saying, if you are feel unsafe where you are, come here because we want to protect you. We want you to feel safe. And thought, wow, but that's 2 out of 50 states, right? We certainly need to see more of that. And that's something I did put a couple of things in the chat. If you want to look for some resources, there's some good ones there. But I was going to ask, Hawley, if you don't mind, you want to say a little about being a parent of a teenager?
I am a teenager. I am not a parent.
I'm a parent.
Yes.
I'm asking Hawley. Becky, if you want to jump in, sure, that'd be great. Yeah, Becky.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Anne. I think that the pandemic and the remoteness gave a lot of people an opportunity to feel safe in that space. My daughter came out to me as gay in 8th grade, which would be, maybe 4 months before the pandemic hit, and came out as trans right after that. And my husband actually said the one thing to me that it still rings true whenever I in my head go down a rabbit hole of not understanding things or being afraid of things. He said the only thing that matters is that we're supportive.
Yes.
I completely understand the confusion from some people about why now there is, I hate to use the phrase, but thank you for your backdrop, Lynn, but it's just a phase. And it's not, it doesn't matter. Are you supportive? Like, just accept people for knowing what they are. You're absolutely right. And so whenever I get myself all worked up or I'm confused or I need to learn more, I just remind myself to just be supportive. It's really what it comes down to.
George?
Yes, what was just said and then goes back to Fern, I think there are 2 kinds of things we can do and need to do. One is political, but the other is, I never thought there would be gay marriage in my lifetime. What made the change was a combination of legal, but what pushed the legal was people shifting their mindsets. So on a daily basis, I have friends who happen to be trans, I have students who happen to be trans, and to not let someone say ugly things in my presence. It's like, no, I care about these people. And did you know, so that each of us have so many opportunities, quietly stand up and speak in not necessarily an angry way, but we're doing this at school, and it's sort of like, rather than say, well, that's all wrong, you're wrong, it's a chance to say, did you know this? Did you know that? Have you opened up a little? can you look from a different window? And invite them to look through that different window rather than accusing them of being stupid, which is what it comes down to when you're judging people. But yeah, we can do a lot bit by bit on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think part of the task, like part of what the whole transfriending thing was about, is normalizing the trans exploration experience and helping people understand that this has been a part of human experience since forever, but not widely supported, I guess. Mike, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I worked for 17 years in the local high school here on the island as a paraeducator. And during that time, I had a couple of students who were particularly challenging to me. They were boys who came across as resentful, resistant, defiant, unhappy people. And I had no idea what was going on with them. But separately, in the last 9 months, I have bumped into 2 of them, and they have revealed to me that they are transitioning to become trans females, and the change in their affect was stunning. It was really, really amazing. All the hostility, the chip on the shoulder attitude had gone away, and they were like, they couldn't wait to share with me what the transition that they were going through, how they'd come to realize that, and they were smiling and they seemed happy, and they seemed happy with themselves. And that was like such a eye-opening thing for me to see. And I thought, wow, that's just wonderful.
Reed?
I think it was about 2018 or 2019. I heard a story about the United Church of Christ camp in outside of on the border with Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, and Sidsen. They were welcoming a new group of campers, and one of the campers was a young person, trans female, and the camp counselors and the administration and everybody was just concerned about, where is this person going to sleep? Where are we? How are we going to handle this? And there was a lot of discussion in advance about, facilities and all this stuff. And after the camp started, there were no issues. All the kids were just fine. It was like this was a grown-up problem, and I've used the quotes around grown-up advisedly, that it actually was not a problem at all. And so I think there's a lot of it's sort of like what George was saying about gay marriage. It was like it was impossible until it became absurd that it wasn't natural. And I feel like that's we're in the middle of that right now, but it's just not it's just not as important as, and in a world where we are increasingly coming to realize that diversity is strength. This is going to feel better for everyone in the long run.
Angela?
Doggone it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry for being late. I just wanted to share because George hit a chord for me that when I was growing up, in Detroit, and we were driving through a downtown neighborhood, and it obviously was a gay neighborhood because there were drag queens and queer folks coming out of someplace. And my dad said to me, "You see those people, you stay away from them. They're freaks and weirdos and all kinds of names." So that set a precedent in my head. And it wasn't until I was doing political work in New Mexico with a bunch of women that happened to be lesbians. And they were like, smart, intelligent, funny, witty, loving, they were just a great community. And I had a traumatic situation happen with a man in my life, and they said, come live with us. Don't worry, no straight woman comes in and ever leaves the same way. And so that was the turning point of my life. And I realized that I was always probably bisexual because I didn't really care what gender somebody was. I pulled on the energy of their heart. And then when my daughter, I was pregnant with her, I thought for sure she was a boy baby in my womb. So I was collecting boy clothes. And then when she was born and they said, you have a girl, I said, I can't. I'm sure I was going to have a boy. So I dressed her with all the boy clothes that I had acquired because I didn't really care what she was dressed in. It didn't matter to me. And people used to say, oh, what a cute little boy. And I'd say, thank you. And I just didn't make a big deal out of it. And so her mindset growing up, and she's just now turning 44, she didn't care. I mean, we were an alternative family. And so when she was in school, she drew the picture of me and my partner and her in the middle. This is my mommy and my other mommy. And nobody told her that. It just was natural. And luckily the school was pretty cool and my circle of friends didn't care. And I wasn't shamed about being gay, lesbian. And so she's pretty much bisexual herself today. She said, Ma, I really like this woman. I said, well, as long as she treats you right, don't be abused by anybody. And she was definitely abused by some guys, but she's with a guy now. And whether I like it or not, it is what it is. But that mindset, George, I really appreciate that because I probably wouldn't have gone through all the traumatic stuff I did with men if I just allowed myself to just be open that there could be another way. So thanks for your time. Sorry I was late getting on the call.
It's okay, thanks. I think one thing when we talked about gay marriage, there was a huge political, socio-political push to get that through. And it was a huge triumph, of course. And we see the result in media and all kinds of ways that being gay is actually sort of trendy in a way now, almost. But that's not true for trans people, because when all those referendums passed and laws passed to make legalized gay marriage, a lot of queer activists they were done. It was one and done, and they didn't really need to stick around. And trans people were kind of thrown under the bus, to be honest. And there's a lot of people in various parts of the queer community who do not feel that that trans people should be in the same queer umbrella, even, which, and again, we've kind of hit on some of this. That's most true for my generation and less true as you get younger. And so by the time you get to like my grandkids, who are, 7 and 9, 10 almost, they have trans friends, they have queer friends that their families do, and that's just fine with them. And that's true for most of their friends too. And I think in our trans friending families, I think we've had 67 families come through. I can only remember one person who started to transition, very self-driven, very clear, and then detransitioned. But all of the other kids, and that's like 100, are very clear about who they are, how they need to be in the world, and what's healthy and wholesome for them. And to me, this is a big piece of why we need to have support groups, and we need to have the education that has been talked about. Everything we can do, like Amelia said, everything we can do to educate, to normalize, to show that people are people first, I think is really hugely important. One of the things my daughter has said on occasion is, being trans is not the most important thing about me, which I think is interesting. There have been times when maybe she felt like it was, when she was more in process. But I think that's been true for a lot of the kids that we've had come through. Reed?
Yeah, I'm wondering of what you just said, Eve, when you were spending so much of your energy thinking about making sure that nobody knew, was it a
Mhm.
bigger part of your life then than it is now?
It was one of the things that I wouldn't let myself address, but who was it? It was Tolstoy talked about when he was young and he and his brother sent him, set to the task of not thinking about a white elephant. You know, it was sort of that. It was this thing that, always that if anybody really knew, they would hate me. If I would let myself know that I would, if I came out at all, I would have to go crazy. I would be institutionalized right away. It was just an impossibility. This was impossible. I didn't match what anybody's description of what a transsexual was, or, and I wasn't sure if I met any of the criteria for what this, that, or the other. The leading institutions at the time, have a friend Susan, and she and her wife, went to John Hopkins, which was the leading institution for sexual people for transition, and they had such rules that said, well, the two of you need to get divorced, and then Susan needs to move to a different city where she doesn't know anybody, and sort of like witness protection. You had to start over, and John Hopkins stopped their transsexual program because they said, well, the results were never what they expected, because they put them into basically, into a self-financed, witness protection. They couldn't, they had to cut themselves off from friends and family. That's a good solution. I think that what I really want to make sure that comes through here today, though, is that it's really easy on the Trans Day of Visibility or the Trans Day of Remembrance, or during June or whatever, Pride Month, that it's really easy to define trans people by the problems we face. And what you've heard from Amelia and what you've heard from Eeyore is that, no, define us by our joy. Define us by feeling, oh God, this is so much better. Define us by the fact that we can now actually reach out to other people. That I have changed in some way that hormones don't do half the change that just coming out does. Surgeries, everything changes you, but the mere fact of actually being out and facing yourself and allowing yourself to be yourself, that's really worth a lot. And it's it's too easy to define ourselves by our troubles.
Lynn, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think for me and for the people who I know who've transitioned, I mean, it's very common to say, a person was grumpy before and they're happy now that they've transitioned. But I want to make sure that people understand, in my case, I had to accept who I was before I could transition, right? I did not find happiness after I transitioned. Transitioning did not bring me happiness. Happiness allowed me to transition, right? And the thing that I tell people who ask when I'm in groups where I'm talking to people who are considering it, is that if you are depressed and if you have no friends and if your job is unfulfilling and your relationship with your family is strained, transitioning is not going to suddenly change that and make you a happy person with a stronger relationship with your family. It's not going to make your job suddenly think you're a wonderful employee. You have to understand why you're doing this, and you have to be okay with it first. And then you can transition successfully.
Yeah.
So, as Ann said, it's different for each one of us. It really is. But we all get to this other place. I didn't, you know, I'd
Oh,
go
sorry.
along with Lynn, you know, I didn't become happy because I transitioned, you know. I had to be in a space where I would let myself transition
Mhm.
first.
George, did you want to say something?
But I think I can't remember who now, but the idea that everyone comes out differently, everyone has a different journey, and it's nobody is a monolith. And so when we're going, I support trans people, I support gays, I support da da da, well, that means 1,000 million different personalities and needs that go far beyond the gender identity or sexuality. It's like when I had an amazing field trip with some fifth graders a few years ago when we went to a place up near the university in Seattle that focused on helping people who lived outdoors or outside a home. And the language was so important. Rather than saying homeless person, you put the person first. They were helping people who had to live outdoors for that time. And just like friends of mine who have cancer, they don't want, oh, this is Cancer Ann. No, it's Ann who happens to be dealing with cancer or whatever. It's so easy to pigeonhole people for the surface rather than what's breathing inside.
No, you're absolutely right, George. Amelia, I think you had a thought too, did you not?
Well, yeah, for me, it was like being released from eons of bondage. I mean, it was so spectacular for me. And I have a little experience here I want to share really quickly. I went in for my first mammogram and I'm sitting there in my gown and there's the technician standing on the podium over there. And all of a sudden, this rush went right through my whole body. And I told the technician, I said, I get it. I was an asshole, typical male asshole, and I didn't even know it. It was like I was blazing trails and doing all this good stuff. And I realized I understood what women go through all the time. And, you know, now when I go into hardware stores, like, well, you know, I'm a dumbass. But before, when I went in there, you know, oh, sir, no problem. So anyway, I just want to share, that was a real eye opener for me and understanding what men don't even understand what they're doing. And I'm not, you know, opposed to men, but I'm just saying that it was a learning curve for me. And I'm still learning, matter of fact, because, you know, I came out, in 15, so that's 7 years. I can't do my multiplication, right? 8 years. Right? 8 years. Thanks. Yeah, and like I said, I'm still learning every day, you know, how to change, but I'm just really thankful. Thank you. And I'm also thankful all of you, you know, putting this program together. It's really, I'm seeing more and more people standing up. Oh, and by the way, here at Jefferson Healthcare, we have it's called Equity Committee, and we're putting together a survey for the people in the trans community, non-binary, and questions what they would like to see in our 101 LGBTQ 101 class. So I'll forward you that I will let them know that this organization, is that right? Is this that you would like to be included in that survey? And you know, why not? Because you know, we're sister counties basically. So
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I think George again.
Oh, yeah, very quickly. One of the things, and I can make a bibliography to be shared. There are various ones you can find on the internet. But one of the most important things, I'm a children's librarian, is one step to normalization and conversation is to include a book that happens to have a trans or a non-binary character, right along with millions of cats and frog and toad. So it's just part of the environment. And then when something does come up, the young people have a point of reference. They've been engaged emotionally with the story, so it's not an alien invasion, it's just part of the whole stew of people. So and I'm lucky that my school has encouraged me to, if I lived in Florida, I'd be fired by now. But to get those books out, and the children are so receptive and so open that sadly, it will take time, but the mindsets are evolving.
Oh, George, that book list would be a great tool because, of course, a lot of us are grandparents. And it would be really wonderful to be able to share lists of, because as you say, there are a lot of books that are so earnest and kind of heavy-handed and tone deaf that just are creeper. But when people under the queer umbrella are included sort of casually as just like part of the family, like one of our favorite ones is the Tea Dragon Society books out of New Zealand. They're so charming and they're just great, but they're everything you can think of in the most adorable way. And my grandkids love those books, right?
Yeah, to circle back to the idea of diversity, I remember as a kid being confounded about what to do when I first met somebody who was deaf. I didn't know what I was frightened. I was out of my, it was like it was because I had no exposure or awareness before I went through that emotional experience, which again, it's one of those situations where it was a problem for me, not for them. And I feel like that kind of attitude about diversity is something that we have not, at least in my lifetime, been very good at embracing. And that's what's going on right now.
And the debate, well, unfortunately, it's a debate about representation in media, and it's also a very big topic right now in children's books, but it matters so much. It matters so much when you grow up and never see anybody or encounter anybody, even in fiction, that matches your spirit. It is so hard. And people who haven't been through various journeys take it so much for granted that everybody is like them, and that's all that matters. I mean, like, I was prepared for a faculty meeting that was going to get all snarky about representation. And I was prepared to say, excuse me, when was the first time you saw a man and a woman kiss? Oh, your parents. Oh, TV. Lucy and Desi. Well, I was 35. It was a movie and people gagged and laughed in the movie theater. There's a difference. Representation matters to open cracks for everybody. Just like Reed was saying, you don't know what to do if you've never encountered it. So if it's part of your life, even on the edges, it's a step forward. It's a welcoming step. I'll shut up now.
Oh, George, thank you. And I know we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to say that for future viewers of this, we at the Queer Elders Family Group at the Senior Center, you are very welcome to attend any or all of our events, which include regular meetings and casual coffees and potlucks and all kinds of stuff. And anyone is welcome to come and meet us as people.